think we're about to get started. So, if you looked at the title of this video slash audio, if you're listening to it on a podcast platform, it is remembering and reminding our common calling. And this kind of came to me recently. I've heard the language of calling pretty much my whole life because I grew up in the church and people always talked about calling. And I ultimately became a minister myself, and people talked about calling, and it was just a common language we used. But the truth is, I never really felt like I had a calling. Never really felt like I had a purpose. As I said in previous videos, when I was younger, I didn't expect to live past 18. So my main goal or purpose, as I said, was to not embarrass my grandmother at my funeral. But I did continue to live and make choices and do things. But I never could really put my finger on how to define a purpose or calling or what it was I was doing until recently. And that's what remembering and reminding is about. I'm going to say some things that are going to sound a little weird for some folks, but it's honest. It's my experience. When I was younger, I could not function from a mindset of separation, if that makes sense. You might, in soon, I don't know why I'm kind of getting stuck on words, but I will start to use language that I haven't really used in a while. Some of that will be talking about the illusion of separation. And when I was younger, I promise you, I experienced myself as one with everything. In fact, I didn't know there was such a thing as not one with everything. I just experienced all of life as a part of me. And I started to get this kind of idea that there was such a thing as people experiencing themselves as separate from other things. Hi, T. And I started to kind of question the way a lot of people experience the world. But honest to goodness, when I looked at the world, I only saw something of aspects of myself. I knew that whatever everything else was, that somehow I was emerging from that same life force. I don't know how to call it. It wasn't until I was in my 20s and I heard another guy say to folks, don't you remember when you used to feel like you were one with everything? And everybody looked at him like he was crazy. Egberto. And I said, I know what you're talking about. And he and I connected over that. But there used to be this sense that all of life was connected, and it was just an inherent awareness. And it wasn't until I was older that I started to really start to accept the fact that many people saw themselves as disconnected from life and one another, and that all of these things that were happening around us were being born from this illusion that we are separate from one another. And now we've been so categorized and put in the boxes and everything that we think that separation is a real thing. But separation is just a very pervasive illusion. It's a false belief. And a belief is nothing but a thought habit. If we tell ourselves the same thing over and over again, we build this habit of thinking a certain way, then that becomes a belief. But I can tell you over years that I've had many different experiences and exposures to different thoughts and had temporary beliefs. I manifest now. I just recently started working at a spiritual center that I don't know very much about, and I'm in the process of learning about. But I know that the spirit underneath everything they're saying, I'm very familiar with because it's always been resident in who I am. And over the past few weeks to maybe a couple months, I have been letting go of certain kind of encounters that basically keep me on the edge of the illusion of separation. And I've been inviting in more relationships that can honor and celebrate that all of us are connected, despite what people want to believe. And yes, there's a lot of us who, out of fear, take actions, temporary actions, out of fear, and this illusion of separation, this illusion of loss, this illusion of lack. You said, what encounters are those, Egberto? Like, I've started to decrease my engagement with people who are hypocrites. Basically, that's what it comes down to. It's a lot of people that I've encountered with in my life that I know that they're hypocrites. I know that they say one thing and do another thing. I know that they accuse people of things that they're doing. We see it all over society. And I just don't want to engage folks like that anymore. Like, I will engage people who authentically want to learn. I will engage people that are curious. I'll even engage people who disagree with me, as long as their disagreement is based in some kind of foundation of reality. But I'm not going to engage people who just say shit for no reason. Like, there's just too many hypocrites, and somebody else can hang with it. That's what I'm talking about. And I have let people know that, yep, the immutable faking open mindedness. I've started to let people know, like, hey man, if you say, and the straw for me, as people know, if you've been watching my videos or reading my stuff, is the fake Christians that I call Screenians. And it took me a long time to get to a point where I call people fake Christians, but I just got to a point where I could not continue to hear people, after studying theology, graduating at the top of my class at the Ivy League theological school, been in the church my whole life. I couldn't listen to it anymore. And I just was like, I can't listen to you say, I don't care if you say I hate these people as much as if you say I follow someone who teaches love and I practice hate, and it's okay with me. I don't want to go on a tangent there, but I got to the end of that. But by letting that go, I started to have other people start to pop in my life that were really trying to live and practice what they preach. And obviously we make mistakes, we get stuck, but then we're being human. But I just could not allow, yes, white evangelical base who support Trump. Yep, I 100% agree. For some reason, I have a little bit of an unstable internet, so hopefully you can still hear me. But I've gotten to my edge with that. But I also thank them for helping me get to my edge. I've gotten to a place where I can say, okay, I'm on a journey. And in this journey that I'm on, where I have to understand who I am and what my contributions are to the world, I thank the people for showing me where my lines are, showing me where my boundaries are, and helping me determine that it's okay for me to create space with certain folks. And so I'm doing that. And out of doing that, I come back to our common calling, which is what I was saying earlier, is remembering and reminding. So remembering what? Well, to me, it's remembering the truth of who we are. And the truth of who we are, from my perspective, is we all emerge from what we can call it all sorts of names. We can say God. We could call it the source. We could say creator. We could say energy. We could say all these things. But whatever makes us alive is the same thing that makes everything else alive. And through that connection of aliveness, we start to remember that life moves in a certain way. There's certain things that are conducive to flourishing. There's certain things that are conducive to thriving. And they repeat themselves all over the world. They're universal laws. So like, if I want to plant an apple tree, or orange tree, or any kind of tree, it all goes through the same process. The trees may be different, or whatever plants they may be different, but they all go through the same universal process. And if they are in alignment with this universal process, they live and they thrive and they grow. If they're out of alignment with these universal processes, they die. And that is the same for us as humans. And so I have decided to remember what is conducive for life, for love, and for flourishing, and to make my life focus on that. And if people want to celebrate that kind of way of being, then I'm going to be attracted to those kind of people, and we can create something better than what we're seeing. I've quoted this guy, Buckminster Fuller, a lot of times. And he says that you can't change things by fighting the existing reality. You have to create something new and make the old thing obsolete. And so I am looking forward to continuing to connect with people who want to create something new, and they're willing to let go of the old, embrace the new, and then create something that's born of possibilities and mutuality and love and all of these things. Let's see. Thierry says, since I try to give grace to all, it's very difficult to be around others not giving grace to all. The judging is too much for me these days. And I think that's a beautiful thing to know about yourself, to get to the point where you're saying, hey, enough is enough. And I had to come to that point. When I got kicked out of my fundamentalist church a bunch of years ago, one of the things they called me was a fake Christian. I wasn't a real Christian. And I understood why they said it, and it hurt me that they said it. And I so much did not want to say that to other people that even in the face of hypocrisy and things like that, I would try to think, well, if they got better information, they would make better decisions. Because when I got better information, I made better decisions. But after seeing some of the things that are going on in our society, I see that with some people, they can get new information, they're going to keep making the same decision. I don't have to judge them. I don't have to think anything about them. All I have to say is, nope. It's just like sometimes you taste something and it's gross and you don't like it and you find it has no health benefits to it at all. You just stop, you know? And this thing can be true. The same can be true for relationships or encounters with other people. We don't owe it to people to make ourselves less than what we are, and I have learned that the hard way multiple times. And now as I find myself meditating more, practicing mindfulness more, reading things that are in alignment with who I know that I am in my core, getting off of Facebook, which I'm barely up there now, thank God. All of those things are showing me and reminding me of what Jesus said. Just to jump back, Jesus was basically about remembering and reminding. He told people that unless you could have the mind of a child, you can't enter the consciousness of the kingdom. And so that's having a renewed mind of getting rid of all the things that tell us that we're less than, that tell us, just like I think about when I was a kid. And I used to watch other Black kids just lose their juice because of this messaging that was given to us. I remember one time I was in school and this kid said he was darker than me, and I don't care about this like colorism and all this other stuff like that. But he was darker than me, and I didn't know that meant something to him. And he said to me, after I made a good grade, he said, "Oh man, I wish I was your complexion. I would have made a good grade too." And I said, "What do you mean?" And he said, "Well, you're smarter than me because you're lighter than me." I said, "Bro, that is the biggest lie on earth." Because I know my mom is darker than me and my mom's smarter than me, and it was like, where'd you get that from? But those kinds of messaging that diminish people early on, and all of us have that in different versions. Even people who have that like white supremacy kind of mindset, also they come into the world and some people tell them things like, hey, these people are taking this from you, or that all these messaging that are all lies. That if we get back to a child mindset, I see my kids, they play with anybody with no kind of malice, no kind of anything, because that's not how kids come into the world. They come into the world and they get taught all this stuff that is covering over the reality of who they are. And then if they're fortunate, they get to a point where they're forced to face that and question it and take all that junk off and get back to the core of who they are. But many people can't do that because of what it brings up. They start to realize, like one of my friends told me, she turned on me and she was tripping like hard. And I was like, why are you tripping on me like this? Like, what did I do to you? And, just out of curiosity. And then she said the truth. And the truth she told me was, she was like, I can tell you love me, but I don't know what you want from me. And I was like, I don't want anything from you. And then she was like, well, I don't know what to do because this feeling that you love me for no reason is making me go insane, because I feel like if I accept you love me for no reason, that means my parents didn't love me because my parents put all these conditions on me and you're not putting these conditions on me. And she gave words to something I think is pervasive in a lot of us. That a lot of times the people that we think are supposed to love us and supposed to treat us a certain way, supposed to teach a certain way, they, for one reason or other, harmed us sometimes, even maybe not physically, but maybe with a certain mentality. And then our allegiance to them keeps us from going back and reclaiming the soul of who we are, the essence of who we are. But that doesn't do anything for you. There's a reason why Jesus said you had to be born again. And I'm not just saying this from a Christian perspective. I'm saying this from a psychological perspective, a philosophical perspective, with or without religion. If you want to be the person that you can be, you have to let go of the things that are binding you and keeping you from being who you already are, to remember who you are. And then your calling is to remind other people, if those people want to be reminded. And if they don't want to be reminded, then give them grace and give them space. Because there's a lot of different ways, T. Reed, to give grace to people. Sometimes giving grace is staying out of their way. Like sometimes I stay away from certain people because I know myself enough to know that if they say certain things to me, I'm gonna hit my limit and I'm gonna tell them, and they can't handle what I'm gonna say to them. So my way of showing them grace is by giving them space. And so that's a way of doing that. And that can also be a way of living into your calling to remember who you truly are, to see yourself as like beloved and wonderful. I don't know if I ever told this story on Substack, but I definitely have told this to people before. In my old neighborhood, this guy was trying to recruit me to sell drugs, and he basically kind of put me down. He told me like, nobody likes you, guys don't like you, girls don't like you don't have any friends, you need a haircut, your clothes are ugly. He was listing it, man. It was ridiculous. And he finished saying all his list, and he told me, but I can hook you up, I can get you a haircut, I can get you some gear, I can get you a girl, all these things today if you work for me, right? And I heard everything he said, and then I said, hey man, is that true? And he said, yeah. I said, so that's what people think about me. He said, yeah. I said, well, if I believe it too, it's going to be a unanimous decision. So I just don't believe it. And then I just walked off. And as I was walking off, he yelled at me and he said, man, that's why I can't stand you. I hate you, man, because you think you perfect. And then I don't know why I said this, but I said, so what? I think you perfect too. And then when he said, what? Then he was so shocked that I said that back to him. And I didn't even know why I said it. It just came out of me. And then he was like, after that, he said, man, I ain't perfect. I'm a drug dealer. I sell drugs in my own community, man. I hurt people. And he started putting himself down. So like inside of himself, he was uncomfortable with being seen as a beloved child of God. So he had something inside of him that told him that the only way he was going to have value and worth is if he got all these external things. But the truth is, we are worthy because we're here. When I used to work with kids who had like different troubled situations, I used to tell them, listen, man, all of reality took a vote and said yes to you. Your job is to say yes to yourself. I was like, the stars, all those things, the planets, the universe, space, all the things, you're here because all the things said okay to you. Yes. So say yes to yourself. So that is remembering. And then you go out there and you remind people. You don't have to do it pushy. You can do it in silence. You can do it by just walking in your own awareness and just living from that place. And then people around you will start to be like, hey, man, like people ask me, like, I'll tell you straight up, people tell me that I walked through existence like I was a 6 foot tall white guy. And I was like, what do you mean? And they would say, like, you just walk in space, like you have the right to be where you are. I'm like, I do have the right to be where I am. Like other people don't have to agree with it, but I have the right to be where I am because I am here. You know what I mean? Anywhere that I am, I have the right to be. You know what I'm saying? But because of the mentality that's been placed on us, we got taught that only certain people can walk around in the authority of who they are. And it's a sad thing. But one of the benefits of thinking I wasn't gonna live to 18 was I was like, well, I'm gonna die with my head up. So I got to a point where I said literally, and I've said this on the video before, but it bears repeating. I got to a point where I didn't want to die like a coward or weak or something like that. So I decided I would imagine that there was snipers on the building waiting to shoot me. And then I would get to a point where I was at peace with it. And then I would walk out the house and I would just say, well, if I get taken out, then I just get taken out. And so I just like decided I don't care when I go out. I'm going to go out with my values inside of me. You know what I mean? That's what I decided I was going to do. And little I know I was going to stay alive. So I'm here still, and it hasn't always been easy, but it's always been an awareness inside of me. And I have chosen that when I'm in spaces where people can't see me and receive me as me, I don't make it their problem. I don't have to change their mind. They don't have to believe anything. It's my responsibility. If they don't want to be around me, I can just walk away, and if there's something in them that I think that I can remind them and it's going to be in service of more people remembering and reminding, then I might do that. Even when I do these videos, I never know who's going to be up here. When I write things, I don't write and say, oh man, I hope people read this and blah, 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 blah. It's a outpouring and a flowering of an awareness is inside of me. And just like I told a friend like this, he said, well, you write and put stuff out there, you trying to get like clout or something like that. I was like, bro, does a flower give a damn if you think it's beautiful? And then he was like, what do you mean? I was like, when you walk into nature and you see a flower, you think that flower is like, let me exists so this person walking by can think I'm beautiful. No, the flower just does that because that's what life does. It's in a situation that's conducive to its flourishing. It flourishes. You walk past, you see it, you give it meaning. And if you're one of some person, you probably snatch it out of the ground. Don't let it live its life because, whatever, like, you're trying to take that beauty into yourself. I don't do that. Like, I create because I create. I put stuff out there because I put stuff out there. If somebody gets something out of it, that's part of me giving to life because life gave to me. That's natural. Just like trees give out oxygen, humans give out carbon dioxide, and then the thing keeps the system going, the system of life. All of us have something inside of us that we receive from all that is, and then it passes through us, and then we are supposed to give it back. And that's the thing that I call remembering and reminding, but that is a part of just naturally being, you know? And so my encouragement to anyone who does read this is to get in touch with the person that you've always been, the person you were when you came into this world before people made up stories about you. I used to tell people that we say, I do want people to see my stuff because I do want it to make a difference in their lives. That's awesome. That's how you create. That's something is how it shows up for you. But you can't, I'm assuming, I know you're a super creative person. I assume you can't not create. So maybe the way, I'm not telling you how to interpret your own experience, Egberto, but you can't not create. You can't not put stuff out because you have so much life in you because you're so open, you receive so much and then you give so much. That's how you flow. And maybe like because you connected to people, that people can have like a more expanded consciousness and that the joy they receive if they open themselves up. And so that does make a difference in their lives. But I think you can't not give and can't not create. Like that's just a part of who you are. So whatever meaning you give it to, I know that I can't not create. If there was nobody here in the earth, I think I wouldn't be able to stop myself from creating because I receive life. So life comes out of me. And to me, I call that remembering and reminding. And you do an excellent job of remembering and reminding. And we all can interpret it infinite ways. There's 8 billion people in the world, and every person is going to interpret their experience differently. But all of us, just like everything else in nature, receives from life, and we have this calling to give back out to life. And then when we don't, it's because of blocks. It's because of things that are inside of us that tell us we're not worthy, or who cares what we think, or whatever the case may be. Or we might feel like we have too much responsibilities, whatever it is, something that we've been blocked. But naturally, even if it's not something that people recognize as art, like I think of my kids as creators. And sometimes what they create is chaos. They just go and like blow through the house and mess everything up. But I see it as them receiving all this energy and then they just do whatever they do with it. So I try not to judge it. And I try to just kind of like partner with them in relationship and help them to learn how to focus and channel that creative energy. But sometimes when they mess it up, I say, man, that's just them doing their thing, you know? That because a lot of these systems that we're in that tell you how to organize everything, how life is supposed to be, and what qualifies as worthy or not worthy is like just stuff that gets implanted in us. But there's a harmonious way of engaging with life. All you gotta do is go walk out in the woods and you'll see how nature cooperates with nature. And we are designed to do the same thing. But many of us aren't doing it because we get told there's a way we're supposed to be, a way that we're supposed to show up. And we compare ourselves to that consciously or unconsciously. And a lot of that, no offense to certain people, but it's that white supremacy mindset that even people of color or women or all these people, they fall in line with it because they got programmed with it at an early age. But even the people who think that they benefit from it, they're suffering from it because they might want to be in the world, come in the world a certain way, but they're supposed to hold up these structures. So then they get all this stuff thrown on them like, you're supposed to hold the line, and then they end up, yep, POCs can be white supremacists too. Absolutely. I know many of them. But but people do that because they get educated into it. They get enculturated into it and they don't even realize they're doing it. Because there's this thing about culture where we think that culture is right or wrong. So whatever our culture tells us is right or wrong, then we think that culture is just the way things are. But culture is created by humans. and we can always create new cultures. Like that's basically what I'm doing. If you haven't read my post already called Do It Yourself Rapture Kit, which is the last post I did, I invite you to do it because I kind of recount how I decided that I'm just going to rapture myself. Like, because people, in the 23rd of September, they thought it was going to be the end of the world and they were getting ready to go up into the sky. And I was raised to believe that. And those things have failed so many times. But the essence of it is that you're going to go to a higher place of consciousness and leave some old stuff behind. So I said, you know what? I'm raptured. I'm raptured. I'm like leaving some folks behind. Bye, bro. I can't talk to you no more. I'm flying out of here. So I did my own rapture. And part of that rapture was remembering who I am, remembering how I came into this world, and then to the degree that I can, remind people. Let me see. Yep. Egberto says, white supremacy harms white people more if, it's why they allow themselves to be screwed by a system dependent on them to be the guards of a failed system. Oh, 100%, bro. I grew up in Mississippi part-time, and then I lived there right after high school. And I used to work at a hardware store. And I lived in a place that was racist. On Martin Luther King Jr. Day, somebody came to harass me at work wearing a Happy N-Word Day shirt. And then I had to like be mindful of how I dealt with it. And I ain't gonna run through the whole story, but then what was sad is some other days later, and I said there's something about this on Substack before too. Some corporate guys were walking around the hardware store, and I didn't expect them to talk to me because I knew everybody was racist. But they ended up talking to me, and then they were just like, you sound like you have some education. I said, I went to college for like 1 year. And then they said, oh, well, if you go back and get your associate, there might be some place for you in corporate. And I was surprised they said that. I was just like, oh, okay, cool. And then meanwhile, there's some poor white people that walked into the place and they were just like, came in being poor and like, living their life. And the little girl was wearing like a white Sunday dress, but it was dirty and she had like Kool-Aid stains all over her lips and stuff. And they looked all happy. And when they saw those white guys in suits, you saw them kind of like try to make themselves feel important. And they're like, how you doing, sir? And the guy just kind of like nod at them, whatever. And then the two corporate dudes were talking and they said to each other, and I was right in earshot. They said, poor white trash, worse than niggas. And I was like, I can't believe it. And I was like, and that is so sad because that's what they think. I'm gonna tell you right now that that's what they think. For some, they hate what if I talk about hate, they hate poor white people. They hate them so much because and I'm telling you this because my dad married a white person in a trailer park, and I had a whole white step family from 3 years old. And so I used to live with them, and I'm telling you right now that people who are well off, they hate them because they're like, no excuse for your existence. And they know, I mean, I'm telling you, I know people don't want to hear it. I don't want to go off on a tangent on this, but it's my stepbrother who is no longer with us was a poor white dude. And I will tell you, they suffer. I was raised around them. They suffer bad because they're psychologically, they used to go, their minds, I will watch their minds like melting and breaking because like you can see I got all these books behind me. Ever since I was a little kid, I used to read. And my step cousins and all stuff like that, all the white kids, they were very poor and very not super smart. And they would hurt because I would be able, my dad would sometimes like, Pedro, what's this? What's that? And he would ask me stuff in front of them. And then they would feel so diminished because their brains would be like, but I'm white. Like I'm supposed to be smarter than this guy. And they would just be having problems. That's a tangent. But it's a part of the reason why I had the personality I have, because I never, ever in a day of my life believed in anything that they call white supremacy, because I lived with white people at a little age and I was smarter than all them. And I don't mean that as a brag. I just legitimately was because of my mom was super smart. So she used to teach me stuff. I knew stuff. And my white step family just didn't know stuff. And I was like, so when people pulled at me, I was like, what are you talking about? And I'm telling you, I've talked to many people who hate poor white people more than they hate anybody. And that sucks if you're on that side, because deep down they know and they hate themselves. Because if they can't get to a certain place, they're like, what the heck? I have been robbed. I almost want to go on a long tangent. I'm gonna tell y'all one more story about this. Then I'll let you go. So I was a chaplain working in a hospital, and I walked into this woman's room because they wanted me to talk to her to get her to go to rehab. And I walked in and I said, "Oh, hi, I'm the chaplain." First thing she said was, "I'm racist." And I said, "Oh yeah? How long you been doing that?" Then she said, "What?" And then she said, "What do you mean? You mean how did I convert to racism?" I said, "Yeah, how you convert to racism?" And I just had a regular talk with her. And then she said, she started listing off every stereotype ever. And then after I listened to her for long enough, I just said, "Can I ask you a question?" She said, "Yeah." I said, "Do you feel cheated by life?" And she was like, "Yeah, I feel cheated," because the world told her everything should be easy for her. And it was until she got divorced. And when she got divorced, she had to go live in a poor neighborhood with poor people of color. And she thought she was open minded till she had to live with us. And then she was hating us. But it was because she hated her own situation. You know, she forgot who she was and nobody reminded her. And all of us, no matter where we come from, age, race, gender, religion, all of these things, I'm reminded more and more daily that we all emerge from a beautiful, creative, like endlessly, ceaselessly creative source that can inform us of the truth of who we are. But in order for us to receive it, we have to be willing to give it to other people. That's why Jesus was like, love your neighbors as yourself, love your enemies, do unto others you would have them to do unto you, because Jesus knew we're all made of the same stuff. And if we can't do that, if we can't give that, we can't receive it. That's why he said it's more blessed to give than receive, because when you give, you actually do receive. And what you give, you receive even more abundantly. But many of us can't do that because we've been told so many lies and conformed to so many lies. So part of this path, my friends, is to remember who you are and then remind others. Anything that arises in your consciousness that tells you that you're less than an emergent from like creation from the source of all life, that's a lie. And the same thing that tells you that about anybody else. You have to honor what that person chooses to create themselves as. And if their creation of themselves doesn't encourage the truth of who you are, then be away from them. But ultimately, we're all made of the same stuff. If you remember and you remind, you're going to be living a completely different life. And that's what I want to encourage all of us to do, because I think that's our common calling. And whenever we receive the truth of life, then we give it, not in the way we go around trying to do what some of these people have been trying to do, but just out of love, just out of creation, just out of being the fullness of who you are. So I didn't have prepared notes. I was kind of just talking off the top of the dome, but I hope that you got something out of it. Egberto, I would love to do a live with you. And if you got something out of this, I do encourage you to share. Let me see. T. Reese said, I feel like our old belief systems are crumbling. It's a challenging but amazing time to be here and to be part of it. Absolutely. And they are crumbling. And I'm glad. I mean, it was hard for me to watch so many of my Christian hypocrite friends, especially my Black Trump supporter friends and my Mexican Trump supporter friends. I couldn't take it anymore, but it was beautiful because sometimes out of those broken things, some beauty emerges. And I just was like, yeah, you know what? It's time to face that. You know, it's time for us to realize that all of us been lied to systemically. We've been lied to, and most of us know it. But we got gambler's fallacy. So we invested so much in the illusion that we're like, okay, it's just gonna hit. It's gonna hit. It's not gonna hit. But you're a creative being, so you can make something beautiful out of this mess. So again, thank you. Share, restack, or whatever it is, because you know, more of us need to remember, more of us need to be reminded so that we can create something beautiful that makes this old dookie dookie obsolete. Peace.